Welcome to Room 2B.
Where there's always room to be an informed citizen.
So Andy, today's lesson, we're looking at the centerpiece of our newspapers these days. Be it foreign policy or domestic policy, everyone's talking about one word, and that word is Israel.
Also the centerpiece, some say, of world history, the cradle of civilization, the Middle East, and the conflict that hasn't just been going on for decades, but millennia.
In foreign policy, Andy, this next week, the United Nations will be taking up a vote advocated by the Palestinians for recognition. Andy, this is a hotbed issue, and Israel says it's a point of national security.
If you thought the jobs bill in Congress was a complicated piece to get passed, just wait until you watch the debate this week in the UN when they debate whether to recognize Palestine as a state, as a country.
For the state of Israel, Andy, this is in the context of the war on terror, as is most other issues in the region. Israel claims that the Arabs and the Palestinians alike have been in a cabal together to break apart Israel ever since it was declared a state back in the 1940s. And Andy, they might have a point. In many of these Arab countries, including the Palestinian government itself, they're for the overthrow of the state of Israel.
Well, you add to that the complexity of what's been going on in Arab and Middle Eastern states through the spring, from the Arab Spring, the overthrow of the Mubarak regime, which had been relatively friendly with Israel, Tunisia, Syria, another one of Israel's neighbors. And this adds to the intrigue and the complexity of, if the Palestinian state is rejected, especially by a U.S. veto, how will that affect the wider Middle East politics?
Well, you've hit on an important point, Andy, and that is there's overwhelming world support for the recognition of the Palestinian government, except for one. One incredibly close friend of Israel has said, not going to do it, and that, of course, is the United States.
Well, and that happens right as the beginning of the presidential election season starts, and we've seen these international politics spill into American domestic politics, particularly with last week's special election in New York.
In the 9th Congressional District in New York, a democratically held district since the 1920s, a relatively unknown, surprising Republican candidate won. And the issue that allowed that Republican to win was the issue of Israel, where you had prominent Democratic Jews in New York saying, listen, we need to vote for this Republican candidate because he'll vote strongly to support the state of Israel.
And that affects presidential politics because now there are questions about how much support will relatively or usually safe Democratic areas in New York or even in the swing state of Florida, how much support will they give to President Obama as he seeks re-election in 2012?
And it's truly remarkable. We know here in the United States that we've been raised in a Judeo-Christian culture. We know from our history books that the beginning of civilization was in Athens and Jerusalem. Athens is still in the news with a possible Greek default. And here we are, 4,000 years later in the 21st century, still talking about Athens and now Jerusalem as the centerpiece of our world, both in foreign policy and domestic policy. Andy, it seems to me here at Room 2B, we need to brush up on our history of Israel, our history of the Middle East region, because it's not just a foreign policy issue. It will continue to play a prominent issue here at home in our domestic culture, but also in our election in 2012. Want to be an informed citizen? We know we're two teachers. No fancy words.
No fancy suits.
Plain talk about issues you need to know.
Just in time.